All right, new book alert. Sorry for starting that video off, dropping my phone, but I went running with my beanie on, so pushes my hair back. My hands were dry. It's really cold outside. It's really windy. So I put some lotion on my hands and my face. Again, my underwears are sweaty from running, but I'm not gonna be able to go home till later. It's kind of like people that go to the gym before going to work, except I don't get the shower. But I'm in my truck, it's okay. But I forgot my water at home, but that's tea. So yeah, new book alert. Edgar Allan Poe, 8 Tales of Terror. When I first initially picked up this book, I was assuming this is how he put the book out. This is how he put the, not really, obviously I've heard of Edgar Allan Poe in movies. People have mentioned his name before. He was born in 1809. In this book, I already read it. I'm not going to read it again, but there's this a word to the reader. I guess it's kind of talking about him. It's like one of my favorite introductions to any book I've read so far, because the reader, he came up with this great idea. It says, if Edgar Allan Poe had been asked to fill out an application blank, say at the age of 21, it might have looked like this: date of birth, January 19th, 1809, Edgar Allan Poe, Boston, Massachusetts. He went to grammar school in Scotland, and then they moved from there, I guess, and then he went to London, and then to England, and then Virginia, and he went to college for a little bit, then he joined the military service. But that was pretty young. He was like 20 years old. And it says his parents were dead, but he had a guardian, John Allen. I don't know if that was his dad or uncle or something. He was single around, and so but he was a poet. And it says he had a couple publications, a couple of works that he had published. There's not many writers back then, so to get published was probably something that the publisher's doors were probably pretty open, And then it says that Mr. Edgar Allan Poe, he pretty much wrote to feed himself. He was very poor if he didn't write, but he wrote for newspapers, and he wrote short stories, and then it says that some of his greatest ones were Ligeia, Ligeia, and The Fall of the House of Usher, 2 serious works of art by then. So yeah, it talks about Edgar Allan Poe. Some said he was a 21, he had been appointed to the United States Military Academy at West Point. 22, he'd been dismissed, disobedience, neglect of his duties as a cadet. At the age of 22, Mr. John Allen, his guardian, refused to have anything more to do with him. At 26, he began working for magazines. So between 22 and 26, who knows? He had been a magazine editor for 4 different magazines over a period of 6 years. He had supported an ailing wife for 12 years. He had written enough to fill 17 volumes, his collected works. For a man who never had money or leisure, a man who has been called an alcoholic, a dope addict, and a would-be suicide, his volume of work is amazing. The legend of Edgar Allan Poe does not fit the facts, that his personal life was actually rather dull, that he has himself to thank for parts of the image that has grown up around his name. He was fond of acting out roles that lent him an air of mystery. But his problems were real. His problems were real, and his attempts to solve them were largely unsuccessful. Why did he write what he wrote? Partly the answer to this question is he wrote for money. If he had not earned a little money, he would have starved to death, as he almost did. At the end of his career, less than a week before his death, he wrote, "I have been invited out of a great deal." Like, he's been invited to do a lot of things, but could seldom go on account of not having a dress coat. I also think maybe he was a sensitive writer, dude. Didn't really care about being around a lot of people, you know. It also said that he might have been better off financially if he had not written so candidly about certain writers and editors of his time. Here was a sample. Mr. Briggs has never composed in his life 3 consecutive sentences of grammatical English. He is grossly uneducated. Sounds like a dick. It says, to say that he wrote for money is not to explain Edgar Allan Poe. There is more, much more. But it is time that he was given credit for being a professional writer, a man who lived by his pen. He wrote for the magazine readers of his day, and his stories are not unlike the stories of other contributors. At 25, he was expressing his low opinion of what other writers wrote. Meanwhile, he was writing nonsensical imitations of cheap magazine fiction. Hypocrite. By the time he was 30, he had convinced himself that the brief narrative was not something to make fun of. So now he respected kind of the short story world, you know. He had written Ligeia and The Fall of the House of Usher, 2 serious works of art. By then, he saw a splendid future for the short story. As a writer of magazine stories, Poe was very conscious of his audience and wanted to get certain responses from his readers. Unlike Alfred Hitchcock, he could not make a mystery or horror film. He had to depend on words. Sometimes for the modern reader, the words get in the way. The sentences are long and the vocabulary is difficult. But the fact that he is read as much as he is, especially by young people, proves that he did not misjudge his audience, that he still can produce a certain unique or single effect in the minds of his readers. His language is 19th century, but his unreal world is the location of every horror picture, of every mystery program on television. So when it mentioned like Ligeia and the Fall of the House of Usher, it said like those are really some of his best works he's ever done, and I was like, man. And then I was thinking, this is not called Ligeia or the House of Usher. This is called the 8 Tales of Terror. Then I went to the table of contents, and sure enough, he writes short stories. So I was thinking maybe this is like a compilation. Somebody else put his best works, his short stories into one book. You know what I mean? And this is it, pretty much. So I'm gonna read those stories. So anyway, y'all, peace.